Deep in the vast emptiness of space, where stars twinkled like distant diamonds, something extraordinary was about to happen. The Xtherian scout fleet was doing what they always did, patrolling their borders with their ultra-advanced ships. They were so used to being the most powerful species out there that they'd gotten pretty comfortable, maybe even a bit cocky. The lead observer on their main ship was just settling in for another boring shift when something weird caught his eye. The energy readings on his screen were going crazy, nothing like he'd seen in his 200 years of space patrol. At first, he thought his equipment was broken. He tapped the screen a few times, the way we all do when technology acts up, but nope, this was real. "Commander, you need to see this," he called out, his voice shaking a bit. The other crew members gathered around, their large, silvery eyes reflecting the strange readings on the screen. They were picking up energy levels that shouldn't be possible for any known civilization. As they moved closer to check it out, everyone on the bridge went dead silent. Through the darkness of space, something massive was emerging. It started as a faint outline, then grew clearer and clearer. The Xtherians couldn't believe what they were seeing. It was a ship, but not like anything in their database. This thing was huge, about the size of a small moon, but that wasn't what shocked them the most. The ship's hull was partially transparent in sections, and inside was what looked like a controlled storm. Lightning crackled and swirled within the vessel, contained by technology that should have been impossible. The storm's energy pulsed through the ship like a heartbeat, lighting up the darkness of space around it. The Xtherian crew started freaking out, in a professional alien way, of course. Their senses were going haywire, their sophisticated equipment couldn't make sense of what they were seeing. Some of the younger crew members were recording everything on their personal devices, knowing nobody back home would believe this without proof. "Identify the origin," the commander ordered, trying to keep his voice steady. When the results came back, you could have heard a pin drop on the bridge. Human. This incredible ship was human-made. The same humans who, just a few decades ago, were still using primitive rocket technology to reach their own moon. The Xtherians had always seen humans as the new kids on the block. Interesting to watch, sure, but not really a threat to their technological superiority. But this changed everything. They watched as the massive ship moved through space with impossible grace for its size, the storm within its core swirling and churning like a contained hurricane. The commander gripped his control panel, his knuckles turning a pale shade of blue. How had they missed this? How had humans managed to develop something so advanced without anyone noticing? The entire crew watched in stunned silence as the ship, which they would later learn was called the TSF Thunder, continued its journey through their sector. One of the junior officers finally broke the silence. Should we hail them?" he asked nervously. Nobody answered right away. For the first time in their history, the Xtherians weren't sure if they were the ones in control of the situation. The humans, those supposedly primitive humans, had just turned their understanding of the universe upside down. As they watched the storm rage within the human ship's core, the Xtherians realized this was more than just a chance encounter. This was the moment everything changed. Their position as the galaxy's most advanced civilization was no longer certain, and somehow that made the universe seem a whole lot more interesting. Back on the bridge of the TSS Thunder, the atmosphere was electric, both literally and figuratively. The lead engineer of the Stormcore project couldn't stop grinning as she watched the artificial storm churning inside the ship's core through the observation window. 15 years of her life had gone into this moment, and it was better than anything she'd imagined. "Look at those energy readings," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. The massive screens around the bridge displayed numbers that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago. The storm within the core spun with controlled fury, lightning arcing in perfect patterns, each bolt exactly where it should be. The ship's captain stood nearby, his weathered face reflecting the blue glow from the core. He remembered when they first pitched this idea to him, using artificial storms as a power source. He'd thought they were crazy. Everyone had. Using storms for power? It sounded like something out of a kid's imagination. But here they were, flying through space powered by what was basically a controlled hurricane. The bridge crew worked at their stations with focused excitement. This wasn't just another test flight. This was human ingenuity pushing the boundaries of what everyone thought possible. Through the transparent sections of the hull, they could see the storm energy flowing through the ship's veins like glowing rivers. "Core stability at 99.8%, called out one of the engineers, his voice filled with pride. 15 years ago, they could barely maintain stability for 5 minutes. Now they had a perpetual storm contained within their ship, providing more power than all of Earth's power plants combined. The testing phase had been rough. They'd lost 3 prototype cores before figuring out how to properly contain the storm. Some had called the project impossible, a waste of resources. But that's the thing about human nature. Tell us something's impossible, and we'll work twice as hard to prove you wrong." The ship's mess hall was packed with off-duty crew members, all crowded around the viewport windows. Nobody wanted to miss a second of this historic flight. They'd all seen the simulations, but watching the actual storm pulse through the ship was something else entirely. Some of them pressed their hands against the transparent aluminum, feeling the slight vibration of raw power flowing through the vessel. In the core control room, technicians monitored every aspect of their artificial storm. Temperature, pressure, wind speed, lightning frequency, everything had to be perfect. One of them looked up at the main display, showing the storm's eye rotating exactly on center. 10 years ago, this same technician had been working on regular weather satellites. Now he was helping control a storm in space. "Running final system checks," announced the lead engineer. This was supposed to be a quiet test run, just proving that the storm core could handle deep space conditions. Nobody had expected to run into anyone out here. But now, their sensors were picking up alien ships nearby, and suddenly their secret project wasn't so secret anymore. The captain pulled up the external cameras. The alien vessels were keeping their distance, probably trying to figure out what they were looking at. Can't blame them, he thought. Nobody else in the galaxy had anything like this. The storm core technology was uniquely human, born from our experience with Earth's weather, our need to power our dreams of space exploration, and our slightly crazy habit of turning dangerous natural phenomena into useful tools. Through the bridge windows, distant stars sparkled against the black of space, but the real show was inside the ship, where lightning danced and clouds swirled in patterns that defied traditional physics. The crew of the TSS Thunder knew they were making history. They just hadn't expected to have an audience for it. "Well," said the captain, watching the alien ships on his screen, "looks like we're about to make some new friends." A flash of lightning from the core illuminated the bridge, as if the storm itself was agreeing with him. The Xtherian fleet's first attempt to scan the human ship went hilariously wrong. Their super advanced sensors, the ones they'd been bragging about to other alien species for centuries, just couldn't handle what they were seeing. It was like trying to read a book in the middle of a lightning storm. Nothing made sense. "Try running another diagnostic," ordered the admiral from his command chair. He was trying to sound calm, but anyone could hear the edge in his voice. The crew scrambled to recalibrate their equipment for the 5th time, but it wasn't making any difference. The storm energy from the human ship was throwing off all their readings. One of the younger officers hit his control panel in frustration. "It's not possible," he muttered. "Their energy readings are off the charts, but they're not following any known laws of physics." The admiral shot him a look that clearly said, "Keep it together," but privately, he was thinking the same thing. Through their observation windows, they could see the human ship clearly now. The storm within it pulsed with a rhythm that almost seemed alive. Lightning asked through transparent sections of the hull, contained by technology that the Xtherians, with all their supposed superiority, couldn't even begin to understand. The admiral's personal assistant approached with a datapad, their hands shaking slightly. "Sir, we've compiled all our initial readings. The humans, they're not using any form of energy we've ever seen before. They've somehow managed to harness and control actual storms in space." The admiral took the pad, but he could barely focus on the numbers. For the first time in his 300-year career, he felt completely out of his depth. Back on the bridge, the science team was having what could only be described as a collective meltdown. These were beings who prided themselves on knowing everything about space travel, who'd thought they'd seen it all. Now they were watching humans, the same humans who just a few generations ago were excited about basic rocket engines, pilot a ship powered by a contained storm. "Look at the energy flow patterns," one scientist pointed out, their voice a mix of fear and awe. "They're not just containing the storm, They're directing it, using it like a giant engine. The others gathered around the display, watching the impossible become reality right in front of them. The admiral stood at his viewport, trying to process what this meant for his civilization. The Zextherians had always seen themselves as the teachers, the advanced ones who would eventually guide younger species like humans toward proper technological development. But now? Now they were the ones who felt primitive. A junior officer approached with more unsettling news. "Sir, we've detected no waste energy from their core. Whatever they're doing with that storm, it's operating at nearly 100% efficiency." This was another blow to their pride. Zextherian quantum drive technology, their crowning achievement, was considered highly advanced at 85% efficiency. The mood on the Zextherian bridge grew more tense with each passing moment. Some officers were recording everything they could with their personal devices, knowing this would change their society forever. Others just stared, transfixed by the lightning show within the human vessel. "Should we power up our defensive systems?" asked the weapons officer nervously. The admiral shook his head. Their most advanced weapons relied on the same quantum technology that their sensors used, technology that was clearly primitive compared to whatever the humans had created. As they watched the TSS Thunder moving gracefully through space, the admiral realized something that sent a shiver down his spine. The humans hadn't just caught up to them technologically, they'd taken a completely different path and somehow ended up light years ahead. Everything the Zextherians thought they knew about technological progress was being questioned. "Send a message to the council," the admiral finally said, his voice quiet but firm. Tell them we need to seriously reconsider our position in the galaxy." As if to emphasize his point, a particularly bright flash of lightning illuminated the human ship's core, reflecting off the stunned faces of the Zextherian crew. The communications officer on the TSS Thunder took a deep breath as she prepared to make first contact. Her fingers hovered over the Universal Translation System, a piece of equipment that suddenly seemed pretty basic compared to the storm churning in their ship's core. Still, it was time to say hello to the neighbors. "This is Earth Vessel TSS Thunder," she broadcast, keeping her voice steady despite the excitement bubbling inside. "We come in peace and welcome open communication." The bridge crew held their breath, waiting. Even the storm in the core seemed to pulse a little slower, as if it too was waiting to see what would happen. The response came faster than anyone expected. The alien transmission was crystal clear, almost too perfect, like they were trying extra hard to sound impressive. "This is the Zextherian Border Fleet," a voice responded, attempting to sound casual but failing miserably. "We notice you have some interesting technology aboard your vessel." The communications officer couldn't help but smile. The aliens were trying so hard to play it cool, but their curiosity was leaking through every word. She glanced at the captain, who nodded for her to continue the conversation. "Yes, you could say that," she replied. "We're conducting our first deep space trial of our Stormcore technology. We didn't expect to encounter anyone out here." Through the view screen, she could see the alien ships maintaining their distance, probably still trying to figure out what they were looking at. The Zextherian response was filled with poorly hidden amazement. "Stormcore technology? You mean you're actually containing and using a storm as a power source?" The alien voice cracked slightly on the word storm, making several bridge crew members suppress grins. The captain stepped forward now, deciding to join the conversation. "That's correct. Would you like a basic overview of how it works?" He knew the answer before they even responded. The Zextherians practically fell over themselves saying yes. As the ship's lead engineer explained the basics of Stormcore technology, the alien silence was deafening. They listened as she described how humans had taken one of Earth's most destructive forces and turned it into something useful. How we'd learned to create artificial storms, contain them, and use that endless energy to power our dreams of exploring the stars. The questions started pouring in from the alien ship. Each one revealed just how shocked they were. But how do you contain the lightning? What about the wind forces? How do you maintain stability? Their carefully constructed image of superior beings was crumbling with every answer. One of the younger Zextherian officers couldn't contain themselves anymore. "But you were just using chemical rockets a few decades ago. How did you make such a massive leap?" The question hung in the air for a moment before the captain answered. Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from thinking differently, he explained. While everyone else was trying to overcome nature, we decided to work with it instead. Through the comm system, they could hear excited murmuring from the alien bridge. The communications officer noticed something interesting in the alien transmissions. Their universal translators were picking up background conversations they probably weren't meant to hear. The Zdex were frantically recording everything, taking notes, trying to understand how they'd missed something this big. Would your scientists be interested in a closer look? The captain offered, knowing it was like asking kids if they wanted candy. The response was immediate and enthusiastic, though the Zextherians tried to make it sound like they were doing us a favor by accepting. As the two ships began coordinating for a scientific exchange, the communications officer couldn't help but feel proud. Humans had just stepped onto the galactic stage in a big way. They hadn't done it with fancy quantum technology or by copying other alien civilizations. They'd done it their own way, with good old human creativity and our knack for turning problems into solutions. The storm in the ship's core flashed brightly, sending patterns of light dancing across the bridge. It was like their ship was celebrating too, showing off a little for their new alien friends. First contact was going better than anyone could have hoped, all because humans had done what they do best, the impossible. The communications officer on the TSS Thunder took a deep breath as she prepared to make first contact. Her fingers hovered over the Universal Translation System, a piece of equipment that suddenly seemed pretty basic compared to the storm churning in their ship's core. Still, it was time to say hello to the neighbors. "This is Earth Vessel TSS Thunder," she broadcast, keeping her voice steady despite the excitement bubbling inside. "We come in peace and welcome open communication." The bridge crew held their breath, waiting. Even the storm in the core seemed to pulse a little slower, as if it too was waiting to see what would happen. The response came faster than anyone expected. The alien transmission was crystal clear, almost too perfect, like they were trying extra hard to sound impressive. "This is the Zextherian Border Fleet," a voice responded, attempting to sound casual but failing miserably. "We notice you have some interesting technology aboard your vessel." The communications officer couldn't help but smile. The aliens were trying so hard to play it cool, but their curiosity was leaking through every word. She glanced at the captain, who nodded for her to continue the conversation. "Yes, you could say that," she replied. "We're conducting our first deep space trial of our storm core technology. We didn't expect to encounter anyone out here." Through the view screen, she could see the alien ships maintaining their distance, probably still trying to figure out what they were looking at. The Zextherian response was filled with poorly hidden amazement. "Storm core technology? You mean you're actually containing and using a storm as a power source?" The alien voice cracked slightly on the word storm, making several bridge crew members suppress grins. The captain stepped forward now, deciding to join the conversation. "That's correct. Would you like a basic overview of how it works?" He knew the answer before they even responded. The Zextherians practically fell over themselves saying yes. As the ship's lead engineer explained the basics of storm core technology, the alien silence was deafening. They listened as she described how humans had taken one of Earth's most destructive forces and turned it into something useful. How we'd learned to create artificial storms, contain them, and use their endless energy to power our dreams of exploring the stars. The questions started pouring in from the alien ship. Each one revealed just how shocked they were. But how do you contain the lightning? What about the wind forces? How do you maintain stability? The carefully constructed image of superior beings was crumbling with every answer. One of the younger Zextherian officers couldn't contain themselves anymore. "But you were just using chemical rockets a few decades ago. How did you make such a massive leap?" The question hung in the air for a moment before the captain answered. "Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from thinking differently," he explained. "While everyone else was trying to overcome nature, we decided to work with it instead." Through the comm system, they could hear excited murmuring from the alien bridge. The communications officer noticed something interesting in the alien transmissions. Their universal translators were picking up background conversations they probably weren't meant to hear. The Zextherians were frantically recording everything, taking notes, trying to understand how they'd missed something this big. "Would your scientists be interested in a closer look?" the captain offered, knowing it was like asking kids if they wanted candy. The response was immediate and enthusiastic, though the Zegtherians tried to make it sound like they were doing us a favor by accepting. As the two ships began coordinating for a scientific exchange, the communications officer couldn't help but feel proud. Humans had just stepped onto the galactic stage in a big way. They hadn't done it with fancy quantum technology or by copying other alien civilizations. They'd done it their own way, with good old human creativity and our knack for turning problems into solutions. The storm in the ship's core flashed brightly, sending patterns of light dancing across the bridge. It was like their ship was celebrating too, showing off a little for their new alien friends. First contact was going better than anyone could have hoped, all because humans had done what they do best: the impossible. News travels fast in space, especially when it's something this big. Within hours of the first Zegtherian reports reaching their homeworld, the alien empire was buzzing like a knocked-over beehive. The Council of Elders, who usually took weeks just to schedule a meeting, called an emergency session right away. The Grand Council chamber, with its soaring crystal ceilings and floating platforms, was packed. Elderly Zegtherians, with their shimmering robes and usually calm demeanors, were practically bouncing in their seats with nervous energy. None of them had seen anything like this in their centuries-long lives. "Play the footage again," demanded one of the eldest council members, leaning forward in his hover chair. The holographic display in the center of the chamber lit up, showing the TSS Thunder in all its glory. The storm within its core pulsed and swirled, making several council members gasp even though they'd already watched this recording dozen times. "How is this possible?" another elder asked, his voice shaking. "Our civilization has existed for 50,000 years. We've mapped every possible path of technological advancement. How did we miss this?" Nobody had a good answer for him. The chief scientist of the Empire stepped forward, looking like he hadn't slept since receiving the news. "The humans," he began, still sounding bewildered, they didn't follow any of the normal patterns. While we were perfecting quantum compression and antimatter containment, they were playing with storms. A younger council member, who'd always been known for speaking her mind, stood up. "Maybe that's exactly why they succeeded," she said. "They didn't know what was supposed to be impossible, so they just did it anyway." The chamber fell silent as everyone considered this. The head of the Science Council pulled up more data from the initial scans of the human ship. "Look at these energy readings," he said, pointing to numbers that seemed to defy physics itself. "They're not just containing a storm, they're working with it, like it's a partner empowering their ship. We never even thought to try something like this." Reports were coming in from every corner of the Empire now. Young Zegtherians were especially fascinated by the human achievement. Social media channels were flooded with discussions and debates. Some were already suggesting that maybe their civilization's rigid approach to technological development had been holding them back. "What do we do now?" asked one of the senior council members, voicing the question everyone was thinking. "Our entire society is built on the belief that we're the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. This changes everything." The chamber erupted in heated discussion. Some argued they should try to keep this quiet to maintain their image. Others insisted they needed to completely overhaul their approach to science and technology. A few were already suggesting they should send their brightest young scientists to study with the humans, something that would have been unthinkable just days ago. "Our people are already talking about this everywhere," pointed out another council member. "Have you seen the public forums? The younger generation is calling this the Storm Revolution. They're questioning everything we've taught them about technological progress." The council's historian, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke up. "In all our recorded history, we've never faced a moment like this. The humans haven't just challenged our technology, they've challenged our entire way of thinking." As if to emphasize his point, the hologram of the TSS Thunder flared brightly as its contained storm sent lightning dancing through its transparent sections. The council chamber filled with an odd mix of worry and excitement. Change was coming, whether they were ready or not. "Perhaps," said the youngest council member thoughtfully, "this is exactly what our civilization needs. A reminder that there's always more to learn, always different ways of looking at things." Around the chamber, heads slowly began to nod in agreement. The meeting lasted well into the night, but one thing was clear, that the Xtherian Empire would never be the same. The humans and their storm-powered ship hadn't just introduced new technology, they'd sparked a revolution in thinking that would reshape an entire alien civilization. The Xtherian media couldn't contain themselves anymore. Every news channel, social feed, and holographic billboard across their empire was showing images of the TSS Thunder. The ship had become an overnight sensation, especially the mesmerizing footage of its storm-powered core swirling behind transparent hull sections. Breaking news. A popular Xtherian reporter announced, trying to keep her professional composure but barely containing her excitement, "We're bringing you exclusive new angles of the human storm core technology." The footage showed lightning dancing through the ship's energy conduits, looking more like art than engineering. Young Xtherians couldn't get enough of it. In schools across the Empire, students were suddenly paying attention in science classes, but not in the way their teachers expected. Instead of accepting the standard theories, they were asking questions that made their instructors uncomfortable. "But why can't we try something different?" one student asked during a quantum physics lecture. The humans did, and look what they created. The teacher, who had been teaching the same theories for 300 years, didn't know how to respond. In their version of social media, a vast network of shared consciousness streams, young Xtherians were sharing every bit of information they could find about storm core technology. They created virtual reality simulations trying to understand how it worked, even though most of their guesses were hilariously wrong. "Check out my theory about the storm containment," one popular content creator posted, along with an animation that made actual engineers laugh out loud. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that for the first time in generations, young Xtherians were thinking outside their traditional scientific box. The older generation was having a harder time dealing with all this. "Back in my day," one elderly Xtherian complained on a public forum, "we respected the proper path of technological development." But even as he posted this, his grandchildren were in their room, trying to create tiny storm simulations with their science kits. Street artists across Xtherian cities started painting huge murals showing the TSS Thunder, its core glowing with painted lightning that seemed to move if you looked at it just right. Some of them added their own twist, imagining what other natural forces might be harnessed if they just thought differently. The entertainment industry jumped on board too. Within days, there were video games letting players pilot virtual storm-powered ships. Shows and movies about alternate technological developments started popping up everywhere. One popular game let players design their own impossible technology inspired by the human breakthrough. "Did you see the latest Thunder feed?" became a common greeting among young Xtherians. They were referring to the constant stream of new images and data about the human ship that kept emerging. Each new piece of information sparked fresh waves of excitement and speculation. In research centers across the Empire, younger scientists were starting to question everything they'd been taught. "Maybe we should look at our own planet's natural phenomena," one researcher suggested during a team meeting. "What else have we been ignoring because it didn't fit our theories?" The change wasn't just affecting science and technology. Art galleries started featuring works inspired by the storm containment systems. Musicians created compositions that tried to capture the rhythm of the contained storm's pulses. Fashion designers released collections inspired by the swirling energy patterns. Even the way Xtherians talked about technology was changing. "That's so quantum," once a popular compliment, was replaced by "that's storm-level thinking." Parents weren't sure whether to be proud or worried when their children started talking about becoming natural force engineers instead of traditional quantum physicists. Some clever entrepreneurs started selling storm cups, drinks with swirling, glowing patterns that mimicked the TSS Thunder's core. They became instantly popular, even though everyone knew it was just clever lighting effects. It didn't matter, people wanted to feel connected to this amazing new discovery however they could. The cultural shift was impossible to ignore. A civilization that had been stuck in its ways for thousands of years was suddenly buzzing with new ideas and possibilities. All because humans had looked at a storm and thought, "Hey, what if we could use that?" The captain of the TSS Thunder stood in the main airlock, watching as the Xtherian delegation prepared to board. He'd hosted plenty of VIP tours before, but this was different. These weren't just any visitors. These were representatives of what was supposedly the most advanced civilization in the galaxy coming to learn from humans. The airlock cycled, and a group of tall, silvery-skinned aliens stepped through. Their fancy robes couldn't hide their barely contained excitement as they looked around, taking in every detail. At the front was the Zexitherian admiral, trying his best to maintain his dignity while his eyes darted everywhere at once. "Welcome aboard the Thunder," the captain said warmly. The aliens almost jumped when a particularly bright flash from the core lit up the corridor. One of them actually pulled out a personal recording device before remembering they were supposed to be acting professional. As they walked through the ship's main corridors, the Zexitherians kept stopping to stare at the transparent sections showing the storm energy flowing through the ship. The admiral finally gave up trying to look unimpressed. "It's beautiful," he admitted, watching lightning arc through a power conduit. "We never thought to make technology beautiful." The human engineer leading the tour grinned. "That's because we didn't try to hide it," she explained. "We wanted everyone to see how it works. There's something amazing about watching a storm power your ship." Several of the aliens nodded enthusiastically, forgetting they were supposed to be serious diplomatic representatives. When they reached the core chamber, even the admiral couldn't keep his composure. The massive storm raged behind its containment field, lightning dancing in precise patterns, clouds swirling in a hypnotic dance. "In all my centuries," he whispered, "I've never seen anything like this." The engineer pulled up the control interface, showing how they directed the storm's energy. "Want to try?" she offered. The admiral looked like a kid being offered the controls to a candy factory. His hands shook slightly as he followed her instructions, watching in wonder as the storm responded to his commands. "This goes against everything we thought we knew," one of the Zexitherian scientists said, but he was smiling as he said it. "We spent thousands of years trying to overcome nature, and you made it your partner." The human crew members exchanged proud glances. They'd heard variations of this all day. In the ship's mess hall, human crew members and Zexitherian visitors sat together, sharing stories and ideas. The aliens were fascinated by tales of Earth's weather, of hurricanes and thunderstorms. "You turned your planet's challenges into your greatest achievement," one of them said admiringly. Some of the younger Zexitherians were practically bouncing in their seats as they asked questions. "Could you do this with other natural forces? What else have we been missing? Can we send our students to learn from you?" The human crew did their best to answer, enjoying their visitors' enthusiasm. The admiral stood by a viewport, watching the storm pulse through the ship's systems. "We thought we were coming to teach you," he said to the captain, shaking his head with a rueful smile. "Instead, you've taught us that there's always more to learn, always different ways of looking at things." As the tour continued, the humans noticed something interesting. The Zexitherians were starting to relax, to let go of their rigid formality. They asked questions with genuine curiosity, shared their own ideas, and even made jokes about their previous assumptions. "Look at this energy distribution system," one Zexitherian engineer exclaimed, pointing to a particularly elegant power flow pattern. "It's not just efficient, it's like watching a dance." The human engineers beamed with pride. They'd always thought of it that way too. By the end of the visit, the line between teachers and students had blurred. Both species were sharing ideas, suggesting improvements, imagining new possibilities. The Zexitherians had arrived thinking they were doing humans a favor by studying their technology. They left knowing they'd witnessed something that would change their civilization forever. As they prepared to depart, the admiral turned to the captain one last time. "Thank you," he said simply, "not just for showing us your technology, but for reminding us that the universe is full of wonders we haven't even imagined yet." Behind him, the storm in the core flashed brilliantly, as if saying goodbye to their new friends. Back in the control room of the TSS Thunder, the crew was going through their final checks before heading home. The storm in the core pulsed steadily, almost like a heartbeat, but now it had a different feeling to it. It wasn't just powering a ship anymore, it had helped build a bridge between two civilizations. Incoming transmission from the Zexitherian Council called out the communications officer. Everyone on the bridge perked up. The main screen lit up, showing a group of elderly aliens trying very hard to look dignified despite their obvious excitement. "We have a proposal," the head counselor said, their voice carrying across space. Our civilization has much to teach about quantum technology and space travel. But clearly, we have even more to learn. Would Earth consider a permanent exchange program? How are young scientists learning from you? Your scientists learning from us. The captain glanced at his crew, seeing smiles all around. Just a week ago, the idea of the mighty Zextherian Empire asking humans for help would have seemed impossible. Now it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "We'd be honored," the captain replied. He couldn't help but add, "Though I think your quantum technology might be a bit easier to explain than our storms." The aliens actually laughed, something the crew had been told Zextherians rarely did in formal situations. As the Thunder prepared for its journey home, messages flooded in from across the alien empire. Young Zextherians sent videos of their attempts to understand storm physics. Artists shared works inspired by the ship's energy patterns. Some messages were just thank yous for showing them a new way of thinking. The lead engineer was in the core control room, making final adjustments, when she noticed something interesting. "Look at these readings," she called to her team. The storm was performing better than ever, as if it had been energized by all the excitement and discovery of the past few days. Down in the ship's archives, historians were already recording everything for posterity. "First contact stories usually involve fear or conflict," one of them commented. "This might be the first time in history where two civilizations met and immediately started brainstorming together." The Zextherian fleet arranged themselves in an honor formation as the Thunder prepared to leave. Their ships, once symbols of alien superiority, now seemed to bow in respect to the human vessel. Through the fleet's formation, stars twinkled like distant witnesses to this historic moment. "You know what the best part is?" the captain said to his bridge crew. "We didn't just show them new technology. We showed them there's always another way to look at things." Around him, crew members nodded. That was the real breakthrough, not the storm containment, but the reminder that innovation comes from thinking differently. As the Thunder's engines powered up, the storm in its core surged with energy. Lightning danced through the transparent sections more vibrantly than ever, putting on one last show for their alien friends. The Zextherian ship's crews all watched in awe through their viewports. "Course set for Earth," announced the navigation officer. "Though something tells me we'll be making this trip pretty often from now on." Everyone knew she was right. This wasn't an ending, but a beginning. The final messages from the Zextherians were filled with hope and excitement about the future. Their rigid, formal language had given way to genuine warmth. "Until we meet again," they said, "may your storms light the way." As the Thunder jumped into faster-than-light travel, the crew knew they were leaving behind more than just new friends. They had sparked a revolution in thinking that would ripple through the galaxy. All because humans had looked at one of nature's most powerful forces and thought, what if? The ship's log for that historic first contact would end with a simple but powerful note. "Today, we didn't just prove that Stormcore technology works. We proved that the greatest breakthrough isn't the technology itself, it's the courage to imagine something new." And as Earth's first storm-powered ship raced home through the stars, carrying stories that would inspire generations to come, the storm in its core pulsed with the same eternal rhythm that had first caught humanity's imagination. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful forces in the universe aren't the ones we conquer, but the ones we learn to dance with.